Escoffier is a new Cryo character coming out next patch, and if she were to release with her current leaked kit, she'd have a huge impact on the meta in a way that many players will be appreciating. So in today's video, I'll present calcs for several different teams that should be elevated by Escoffier, and see just how impactful she should be for them. Let's get started. So, with current numbers, Escoffier provides more than enough healing for furina teams, while also dealing high cryo damage with good application and uptime, and also reducing hydro and cryo resistance based on how many are on the team. So naturally, she'll be best used in freeze teams. Hydro DPS historically haven't really used freeze teams. That's been more of a cryo DPS thing, but Escoffier might just change that, being excellent for hydro characters that don't care about vaporize, such as Ayato, Yelan, and Neuvillette. With Yelan, you could do teams where she's on-field driving herself, with many different options as the last slot. You could use Sync Show, and have excellent damage from all three hydro units due to low energy requirements, and Yelan getting her skill twice. Essentially, this would be like current Yelan mono hydro teams, but it's looking to be way stronger. For the fourth slot, instead of Sync Show, you could also use unique options like a C6 Kaya, for example, dealing a good AoE sub DPS damage while being an especially good battery since he makes extra particles and freeze, so Escoffier would need very little ER, if any at all. His damage can be even higher than my numbers show here in Multi-Wave or AoE, where his burst gets extended by his C2. But as mentioned, Ayato should benefit from Escoffier a lot as well, so instead of having Yelan drive herself, have him on-field driving instead. This would have the same benefits as Sync Show, with all three hydro units having low energy requirements from triple hydro, and Ayato's field time also being just right for Yelan to use her skill twice. The great thing about Ayato in particular here is, he has really good AoE, so he's adding good AoE to what would otherwise be a mostly single target team. Because of this, and the DPS still being similar to other single target options here, I think Ayato would actually be the best in slot for this team. Ayato possibly being the best in slot for a team with modern day level damage and DPS is pretty insane to think about. And with Neuvillette, it might seem like he wouldn't be good with Escoffier since you lose a Draconic stack, but in his current team with Kazuha and Shilonen, you have to swap back to both of them in the middle of the rotation to refresh their buffs. If current information is correct, it seems like you wouldn't have this issue by using Escoffier and Seedlali in place of Shilonen and Kazuha, thus allowing Neuvillette to do far charged attacks in a far shorter rotation than what's normally possible. If enough time can be shaved from the rotation, this should be a massive increase, putting his DPS up to current natlan standards while having the comfort of both a shield and freeze, which is pretty absurd. Moving on to Cryo DPS, if you pull Shenhe on Chronicled Wish, congratulations, you made an excellent decision, as Escoffier is looking to fix more than half of Shenhe's issues at the same time. By healing, Shenhe can now fit easily into teams with furina, whereas before it was hard due to no room for a healer. And another issue Shenhe has had is that she buffs the entire team, but you'd only get her buff on your main DPS due to the lack of a good cryo sub DPS for it. Escoffier giving both of these things at the same time will be huge for cryo DPS that can use Shenhe well. So Ganyu, she'll be getting a big upgrade over Melt, since you'll have her getting buffed well by everyone on the team, and able to use her burst, which she can't do in Melt. She'll be doing similar, if not more damage than what she does in Melt, but while having a ton of sub DPS damage to go alongside it, so Melt won't even be able to remotely compare to this. Note that I'm not confident on the exact rotation I have assumed here, but even if the rotation is off and the DPS is lower than shown, it's still basically guaranteed to be way better than Melt regardless. Likewise, Ayaka should be able to do the same team and get a big upgrade. A problem I've seen pointed out is that Ayaka wouldn't be able to use grouping on the team, which is true, but look at the full picture. Ayaka is usually a hyper carry on her teams, meaning her burst is not just the vast majority of her damage, but the entire team's. That's always been a problem practically speaking, since the burst can overkill a wave of enemies and then new ones spawn away from it, or enemies just simply move away from the burst and no longer get hit, leaving you dealing very little damage until your burst is available again. However, here you should have great damage coming from both Furina and Escoffier the entire rotation, so this will be far less of an issue. So while you do still have the issue of not having grouping in AoE, what you would gain here should be far greater than what's being lost, at least in my opinion. There's also Risley. If Seedlali were able to buff with Scroll, she'd be fantastic here, providing that as well as Thrilling Tales or Starcaller buff, and lower ER requirements on both Cryo units. This would be way better than Risley's current melt teams, but this is one team that absolutely has to be played in post-release to properly theory craft, because Citlali may not actually be able to proc Scroll into rotation, but if she can, expect this to be Risley's undisputed best team. If Citlali doesn't work well there, then Yelan should be best instead. Less damage on Risley, but you gain Yelan's great damage. Wouldn't be quite as strong as Citlali should she work, but still very strong, and should be better if Yelan has any vertical investment at all. And lastly for Cryo, Eula. One of the main reasons Eula's team DPS in her current teams is so low is the rotation time is excessively long due to on-fielding Raiden for energy. With a triple Cryo team using Mika as the third Cryo, Eula should be able to use around 160-ish energy recharge with no need for extending the rotation beyond 20 seconds. You lose out on super conduct, but Eula has her own physical shred, so with Eula having much shorter rotation time and a ton of sub DPS damage, this should be substantially stronger than her current team options, giving Eula an unironically strong team that's actually properly utilizing her kit. That's all for Hydro and Cryo, but Escoffier may be useful for a few DPS of other elements as well. As an example, although Wanderer wouldn't benefit from Escoffier's buffing, he does get 20% crit rate if his skill swells Cryo, so that, alongside still having good sub DPS damage from her, looks like Escoffier should be slightly more DPS than a C0 Furina here, although that is assuming you'd actually be able to swirl both Pyro and Cryo with Wanderer for both buffs, which would need to be tested in post-release to see if practical. Alternatively, Bennett could be replaced with Furina here and do a Freeze Wanderer team. It would only be slightly less DPS than Bennett, but with having Freeze throughout the entire rotation, if Furina is constellated at all, it would be higher DPS than Bennett. If Wanderer can solve both Hydro and Cryo reliably against frozen enemies with this team, then this would be even stronger, but that is another thing that has to be tested in post-release. And then Pyro melt DPS like Mavrika, Arlecchino, and Gaming could use double Cryo with a Escoffier in place of a buffer like Shalonin or Xianyun, trading personal damage for sub DPS and more consistency. While this may calc similar to Shalonin on paper, in practice I don't see it being worth, since these melt DPS are all hyper carries with extremely high personal damage, so in practice it should be better to maximize their damage as much as possible, but it should still be a good option if you want the extra consistency of double Cryo. And that's about everyone. To recap, based off current numbers going around for Escoffier, if she were to release like this, she would have a massive impact on the meta, elevating up almost every Hydro and Cryo DPS upper tier, with characters like Ayato, Ganyu, Eula, Ayaka, and Risley shooting all the way up to having 5.x level team DPS. She wouldn't be elevating anyone past current top DPS standards, but instead bringing up existing characters closer to those levels, which is very healthy for the game, and I love to see stuff like this. But I'm curious to know your thoughts, so if you enjoyed the video, please be sure to like and subscribe and comment your thoughts down below. Also feel free to join my Discord where you can communicate with me and my community directly. Thanks and goodbye. I can't pretend my pain.